Hi, I'm Corey Nathan, and this is Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. Your home for edifying, provocative, and fun conversations among high-profile public figures and regular folks like me. We talk about faith and politics and all kinds of topics that really matter in our culture. So if you're tired of all the screamers out there taking all the oxygen out of the room and you want to join us in taking some of that space back, you'll love talking politics and religion without killing each other. Thanks for spending some time with us. Enjoy today's show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host. So grateful to have a place to talk about faith and politics and big ideas in our culture with all kinds of interesting, accomplished folks of goodwill and good faith. And I'm really excited to announce that it's easier than ever to find us and join our community, and that's on politicsandreligion.us. The AND is spelled out, the AND. Politicsandreligion.us. And on our site, I have a favor to ask. Would you consider becoming one of our patrons? Now that politicsandreligion.us is all set up, we're able to receive your support. So check it out. Give that some thought. Consider becoming one of our patrons. It'll really help us keep the lights on and continue having the conversations like the one we're having today. Michael David Cobb Bowen is co-founder and co-editor of Free Black Thought, a group of scholars, technologists, parents, and citizens determined to amplify vital Black voices that are rarely heard on mainstream platforms. Michael is a business intelligence professional and data engineer. He's a past contributor to NPR, Young Republicans, TV One, among others, and is an essayist on Stoic Observations. And on top of all that, Michael might describe himself as an entrepreneur, foodie, anti-fragile, true neutral, audiophile, gearhead, hacker, shooter, and ooda. And I don't even know what that last one is. Either way, it sounds like a fun mix of fascinating ingredients. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm really appreciative for you coming in. I'm a little intimidated, I have to say. I've read a lot of your work, and it is just packed. It is dense with wit and the right kind of skepticism and narrative. And so I feel like I'm a little out of my league. So I appreciate you bearing with me.
I'm just a guy.
Just a guy with a heck of a lot of wisdom and intelligence, and like I said, wit. And it's just really fun getting to talk to you here. So since we're a show about politics and religion, I figured my first question would be about religion. And you've mentioned that both of your parents each had a number of different chapters along their spiritual faith, religious journeys.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you walk us through some of that and how that all affected your own religious thinking?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up here in Los Angeles, oldest of 5 kids. My father's from New Haven and my mother's from New Orleans.
Oh.
And they met in New York, oddly enough. So my father grew up, his father was a big leader in the local church of Black Episcopalians. He knew them all in New England. He was a Shriner. He was an Elk. He was a Mason, and he was pretty well connected in that. But when my dad studied sociology and then went to the Marine Corps, and he came out of that and he didn't go to church at all. So that was just how he was his upbringing, kind of in the shadow of Yale University, kind of old school, proper, that flavor. My mother, on the other hand, grew up, her dad was a jazz musician, and he traveled around the world. And her mother was she was a seamstress, a great, I just learned this because my mother has a phenomenal memory about the cutting room and what different blades you used to use. But she was very a homebody, where she lived in New Orleans in a small parish, and never really went further than, a 10-block radius. So my mother grew up in that cloistered kind of Catholic upbringing, very conservative. But then she had problems with the Catholics in New Orleans. And so as they raised their family out here in Los Angeles, neither one of them brought up religion at all. And I never heard of this character called Jesus until I was about 8 years old. And that's when my youngest brother was born with spinal meningitis, and nobody could figure out what was going on. And it miraculously cured itself. And this got my mother back on the boat, as it were. And so I had to erase all the peace signs from my notebooks that I was going to school. And, I had to read the Bible, and I had to accept Jesus as my personal savior. And when people ask me about it, I says, well, that's my business. He's my personal savior. I don't have to tell you what we talk about.
The non-evangelistic approach.
Right. But she was with the Pentecostal church. So and she is right now very fervently Christian, interprets all world events through the Bible. My father gradually went back towards the Episcopal Church. I went to Catholic school, and my best friend is Jewish. So I've always had this no religion, some religion, my dad's religion, my mother's religion, the religion of the kids in the neighborhood, which was Baptist all over the place, and then the religion at people at school. And I went to a middle school, which was run by Columbans, and we had spanking nuns.
Oh.
And then I went to a Jesuit high school. So, by the time I'm 18 years old, I've seen 6 or 7 different angles on religion. And, I said, well, the bottom line is Christianity. And those are ethics I think we can all understand. And they're not too difficult to get your head around.
Yeah. So you felt you were able to speak the cultural language, if you will, of any number of different Judaism, Catholicism, evangelical Christianity. What denomination did you say your mother was?
My mother was a Pentecostal, and now she's a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, wow. So those are, I'm still relatively new to, well, I guess not. I became a Christian about 20 years ago in my late 20s, but I grew up in a very observant Jewish household. So we grew up first in New York and then in New Jersey, but all the neighborhoods were either Jewish or Catholic. So, and to me, it was all kind of the same thing. But then in my 20s, when I got to know some evangelical Christians, that was a whole different thing. And I ended up becoming an evangelical Christian. But so similarly, it sounds like there are some similarities there. In fact, you said something, the Jesus character. When I first started reading the New Testament, to me, I was just looking at it from a very literary standpoint, trying to derive what this was saying, what the human writers were, who they were writing to. I was looking for overarching themes and things like that. And I thought of the Jesus character as just that. Obviously, it took on a whole different meaning for me theologically. I do need to ask you about something, though. You mentioned that your mother's father was a jazz musician.
Yes.
Oh, boy. So I'm trying to place what period that might have been. I might be more familiar with the New York jazz scene. Was it the 50s that he was most active, or?
Yeah, I imagine so. He was around. He was a trumpeter. His name was Edmund Fouché. Okay. And he was with Dejan's Olympia Brass Band.
Oh, wow.
So he was a trumpeter.
So he must have been somewhere between Dizzy and Miles' ascendancy, right?
I imagine so, but this was the full improvisational thing. I remember the first time I heard him play, and it just sounded like everybody was going in their own direction. And I was kind of young to listen to jazz, but it was just a lot of traditional New Orleans, and second line kind of jazz.
Okay.
So yeah, he was a character.
Do you listen to jazz? Are you a jazz fan?
I do.
Oh man,
I do.
Okay, so here's where I'm at. Anytime that Louis' rendition of La Vie en Rose comes on, I got to stop everything and just listen. That's one thing. But I got as far as Monk and Coltrane, and then Miles, obviously his blue period. But once Coltrane started going avant-garde, I just don't think I'm a sophisticated enough listener for that stuff.
Yeah, that may be. I don't like the new jazz so much. My approach to it was strange because my household was musical. My dad had kind of eclectic tastes, nothing particularly deep, but that grew up in him over time. But I can remember the first albums I was listening to. I listened to the Basie, the Atomic Basie.
Okay.
I mean, that's like a childhood memory. Also, Peter and the Wolf, because it was a colored album.
Oh.
Vinyl there. The Four Freshmen, Nancy Wilson, Frank Sinatra, The Wee Small Hours of the Morning. That's also just a classic one for me. And Henry Mancini, Breakfast at Tiffany's. Okay. I just love listening to that album.
Yeah.
So definitely the Atomic Basie and the Breakfast at Tiffany's were just that, and West Side Story. Those were like three thematic albums from my young childhood. I mean, I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I'm loving this stuff.
That's sophisticated taste for a 5-year-old.
And we had a piano. The lady next door had a piano that I could bang on.
Man.
So if my school would have continued its music education, I'd probably be a pianist.
Well, I learned how to play piano just good enough to woo some girls.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
That's the entire.
There it is. Exactly. So if I got back to it, I just want to play scales for a year and just really do it, so I could play some Monk and play some great compositions, try to come even 1% of the way that Oscar Peterson has gone.
Oh, geez.
Just play,
I love solo piano. Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite instrumentalists.
Yeah.
So, but when I finally got into jazz, I just thought it was inevitable. I think it was inevitable as a sophisticate that I would get into jazz, I would get into classical, and so I kind of started when I got serious about listening in mid-20s. I started with the standards. I started with a big stack of Duke Ellington.
Okay.
And I learned all of those, and Chelsea Bridge was one of my favorites, and just listened to that whole songbook.
Man.
And I enjoyed listening to multiple versions of the same song. So I remember when Wynton Marsalis's first album, Think of One, came out.
Like 81 or so?
Yeah, 82 maybe, 82,
yeah.
83.
Yeah.
Think of One, and then I listened to him, and of course Chick Corea. Somebody tried to introduce me to Mahavishnu, and I had already liked Stanley Clarke and Chick Corea and that gang, Return to Forever. And I tried to go to that level of avant-garde, and I couldn't follow it. But The Romantic Warrior is still one of my all-time favorite songs.
I do have to say that you mentioned Wynton Marsalis. Somebody just asked me literally earlier today, who are my top 3 people that I'd want to interview. And of course I said Michael D.C. Bowen, but so this is a dream come true. But Wynton Marsalis is definitely on my Mount Rushmore, because talk about politics and religion. He puts it into sound, and he can.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I met him at BAM.
Where'd you meet him?
Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Oh, wow.
He was playing the live accompaniment to Bill T. Jones, Griot, New York. I can still remember that. And I was into the Brooklyn scene with my contemporaries at the time. And I got to meet him backstage, and he's a very mellow, cool dude.
What a treat, man! What a treat! That would definitely be a dream come true. He narrates the American experience with all of its flavor, and with a sense of grace and poetry, while still holding on to, some of the minor keys of our history, if you will. So I really appreciate how he's his contribution to the culture.
Hi, I'm Will, your political host and a cisgendered liberal Democrat.
And I'm Pastor Josh, your faithful host and a conservative Republican who really is not sure what cisgender means.
If you're interested in politics and religion, make sure you check out our podcast, Faithful Politics.
Each week we do a deep dive into a topic that intersects with both these subjects and try to understand them through a bipartisan lens.
We bring in experts from the world of academia and those who work on Capitol Hill, as well as the White House.
Available wherever you get podcasts.
But I could talk about jazz all day, but I also wanted to ask you a little bit. So I saw that you studied at USC and Cal State Northridge, right?
Mhm.
In my neck of the woods. So you grew up in SoCal?
I grew up in Crenshaw, West Adams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all getting nicely gentrified these days.
Oh man, I haven't gone too far outside, in the last 2 years, but I got to go out and see how things are in my old stomping grounds here.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
So what did you study? Did you study computer science or right out of the gate?
I did. In high school, I fell in love with the computer, and people were always telling me I was a smart kid, but I didn't know how I was smart. And then sophomore year, I took geometry, I took public speaking, and I found the computer room. And I said, I'm logical. That's what it is. And I finally understood why I was smart, because I just kind of listen to what people say and then watch what they do and check the difference. And I make logical sense of life.
Yeah.
So I originally thought I could get into, I just loved USC. No doubt about it. It was just the university. That's where I thought I was destined to go. I couldn't afford it, but I went in. They didn't have a computer science undergrad. There was electrical engineering. So I said, well, if I can't program them, I'll build them. But I was always on the language side. They just didn't have computer science. And nobody had any idea in the late 70s that computer science would be as big as it is today. And then so I dropped out, and then I worked. I became a union guy. I did contracts. I did odd jobs for 4 years. And then I worked my way through a computer science degree at Cal State Northridge.
CSUN, yeah. So one of my best friends, Ira Rosenheim, who's in an adjacent field professionally to what you were doing, was trying to explain your specialties. I shared a little bit about your profile with them. That he said that you help to develop cloud-based systems with a focus on high-performing databases. So I sort of understand that. And I'm almost afraid to ask you this way. It's like a meme that you've lamented before. But can you explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old?
Sure. LI5.
No. Just as a uninitiated.
No. Okay. So there are two granddaddies of databases, and one of these guys was named E.F. Codd. And E.F. Codd came up with an idea of relational databases, and basically meant you can make everything logically into something like a table. So if you think of a spreadsheet is just a big table. So you name the columns. Yeah. Those will be called fields. And then you name the rows, and those will be called records. And then he came up with this combinatorial logic that says, well, if I have a spreadsheet over here that relates to a spreadsheet over here, all I have to do is match keys. So if the key was, the state you were born in, and one of these is car manufacturers and the others is just people, you can relate the car manufacturers to people by the state that they come from. And that would be the column state. And so that became the major paradigm of database technology during the 70s and 80s. And the IBM did it, Oracle did it, all these large companies. And so the telephone companies, took it to the extreme because they had to bill everybody. So they had these huge relational databases. So every phone call that you made, Pac Bell would have to put it into that database and charge you 2 cents or 5 cents or whatever. And so it turned out that as time went by, there's another guy named Peter Drucker. Right. And Drucker said, professionals can manage businesses. So why don't we forget this old idea that it's just, if you're a Rockefeller, then you know a seat of the pants kind of business, and say, well, let's apply some thinking to it, some management skills. And so you have this new invention called the MBA. And the MBA doesn't have a seat of the pants feeling for their business. They kind of go like the guy at Wall Street. Greed is good. Let's do buying and selling and trading companies and stuff like that. So the modern corporation was built here, and they found out that they had all this data. The phone company had all of your bills for 20 years. How could they improve their service by looking at their data? And when they did that, and they tried to ask simple questions like which people buy the most phones, it just crunched all their computers. They couldn't handle it.
Oh, wow.
So they had billions of records and all of this data and no way possible to ask it a common sense question.
Yeah.
So then there grew a new branch of computer science that now we call data science. And we can make companies being data oriented, data centric, instead of seat of the pants. Right. So some real analytics, some real algorithmic stuff. And there are a new generation of databases that do that. So the other titan of the database industry is a guy named Michael Stonebreaker. And he came out of MIT, and he's a Turing Award winner, top tier computer science kind of guy. And he said, let's take that EF cod idea and make it work better. And long story short, he invented something called a columnar database. And his columnar database was called the C-Store project. And I work on the descendant of that. So the top database companies now in America use this fundamental idea so that you can actually do analytics and that. So that's where I work these days, and it's good work.
Yeah. So vocationally, you've contributed a great deal in that field. Avocationally, at a certain point, you began writing online. I mentioned it a little bit earlier.
Yes.
But and specifically with a focus on social and political issues.
Yes.
At what point did you decide to start writing? Also, how did you develop your writing style? As I said, it's so dense. Talk about New Orleans. It's like a really good thick roux, to get the whole thing going.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, I was a sharp kid, and I expected to go to, USC and get an engineer's degree. They don't even have engineer's degrees anymore. It's after the master's, but before a PhD. And like most kids born my age, I thought I'd be an astronaut. And then by the time I was 18, I said, I want to be the computer guy on Jacques Cousteau's boat. And so I knew I wanted to be the computer guy. And, some of my family on the New Orleans side speaks French because I had an uncle who was in the original Peace Corps, and he went to work in West Africa. And so learning French was part of that side of the family. So I had these language skills, and I was always interested in writing the programs, not so much the machines themselves. I didn't love the machines. I didn't want to be inside the machines. I wanted to use my language skills with these computer languages and express myself in a different way. And so I've always felt that I'm a writer for computers, for machines, and for people. And my first internships were at Xerox here in Southern California. And we wanted to create the office of the future. And so we had, very fancy workstations. And then Xerox kind of fumbled that future, as we understand. And Steve Jobs famously took a tour of the Palo Alto Research Center, which was owned by Xerox at the time, and took those lessons and made them into the Macintosh. Well, so I said, I can be this yuppie, but I'll miss all this other stuff. I don't understand. I'm at Northridge, and I don't understand why nobody talks about Shakespeare. Nobody talks about cultural things. Nobody talks about art. It's a commuter school, and everybody wants to get an entry-level job. That's the success criteria. And I'd already been educated by Jesuits. I know there's something more to life than that. And so I always understood the technology because I started programming when I was 14. And then I just said, well, what does the other half do? Who is this chatting class? Why do people pay attention and pay money to Irma Bombeck? Who is this guy? Who are all these writers? Who is Camus? And so I had this curiosity about culture, and I wanted to talk to people. And then I realized, after 4 years of not being in university, I'm socially isolated. And so I said, I got to start reading. I got to start doing something. I write poetry or whatever I do, or I'm going to lose my mind. I'm just going to hang out, and do nothing else. So I knew that I had to, save my own intellectuality. And it was really fun going to college because, now I'm have all the privileges of a college student that I missed when I was, 18 years old, being older. And then I just said, oh, this is great. This is great. So I started reading some of the books that were on my dad's shelf. So I started reading Henry Miller. I read Malcolm X. I read a whole bunch of stuff, but it was always the music and the literature and the science put together. And I had to find a way out. So at Xerox, when I figured, I can get to this Fortune 50 company and they can mess up. Well, maybe I'm going to be underemployed for the rest of my life. I'll do this other stuff as not a side hustle, but, just to keep my mind going, because I can focus all my mind and learn all this technology. And then 3 years later, Xerox says, oh, we're getting out of that business. We're not going to make computers anymore. I'm like, what? You guys invented Ethernet. And now you're not getting in the business. And so the guy who worked for Xerox went off and founded 3Com, made $1 zillion. The guy who founded Interpress, which was their language standard for printing, went off and founded Adobe, and they made $1 zillion off of that. And I'm like, well, this is my fate. I thought I was going to get in the corporation that was going to do, and I just said, well, I'll do some writing. And I wrote and just kept writing. And at some point when I was about 26, 27, that's when the big poetry scene came on. And so I started hanging out with the poets and doing the poetry slams and that kind of stuff. And it was exciting. It was fun. I did that bohemian lifestyle for a while, and I just kept writing. And the World Wide Web came along, and I was there the whole time. So I've always been a writer online. A writer writes, and I always have done it in a Socratic method. So I'm going to put stuff out there, but I want to hear what you have to say about it, and then I have to respond.
Yeah.
And the more I did that, the more I realized that I had to use a proper English, because English wasn't the first language of everybody I was talking to. I couldn't use my old slang that I talked in the hood because they wouldn't understand what I'm saying. So my aim was to be unambiguous and clear, and then just ask the questions. And so my style of writing evolved from trying to be polite, trying to do things like a structured debate, trying to think about in the future, when they look back at this stuff, will they understand what we were talking about? Will they understand what were we thinking? So that's kind of my favorite question, is what were we thinking? And put it all out there. So that eventually led me to Stoicism, but there were a lot of side trips.
Yeah. So if you're not paying close enough attention, you might think that some of your pieces are free flow of thought. And in a way it is, but there's a certain structure to it and references that are dropped in throughout a one line of thinking. And there is a flow, and you could sort of, I see what you're talking about. I was thinking before you even said it, that poetry you're all over poetry, because that combination of a love of language, a love of literature, yes. The logical side that needs to come with your computer science that I guess feeds yes. your computer science vocation, and so many other, or the music of language, all these things sort of feed into each other, where poetry would make sense. It's still, even in your prose though, it still shows up, not to blow, smoke, but it still shows up in your writing. Right. So you've alluded to this sort of journey, the way you're socially thinking in terms of social issues, political issues. You said about yourself, I have been left, I have been right, and now I am stoic. So first, can you tell for our audience and for me, can you tell us what it means to be stoic in a contemporary context?
There's actually a kind of a metaphor and an image that I get when I think about people who follow the news so much that they like the NPR news quiz. So if you're playing Trivial Pursuit, you have to have the answer, and that's kind of what the NPR news quiz seems like to me. which is, are you up on the news? What would this person say? And it's kind of fascinating to me. I'm going to try not to make this into a story.
No, you can storify it.
Sure. So somewhere my junior year in high school, I pretty much kicked butt on all the standardized tests. And I said, okay, I'm pretty smart. I know which way I'm going to go. I'm going to go to USC, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm at home bored doing nothing. And I watch this show. And there's some guy named Regis Philbin who's sitting up there, and he talks about the fact that he has perfect feet. And everybody knows that Regis Philbin has perfect feet. And so he's telling jokes about celebrities and restaurants in West LA. And I have no idea what he's talking about. He's like, if somebody said Dua Lipa, all right, I don't know who Dua Lipa is. My daughter does. So she's a musician and she makes fabulously produced records. But the audience is cracking up. He's obviously a popular guy, and he knows all of West LA. And I have no idea what he's talking about. So now I have to open up my head to this whole new genre of talk, this entertainment talk, so I could get the jokes. I want to laugh along with the audience. And so I started reading Los Angeles Magazine and the Reader and the LA Weekly. And I got into all that, West Side LA kind of stuff. And then I learned to eat Thai food, and I learned to eat sushi and all the LA things, right? So I think about bourgeois America. Why do we listen to the news? Because we want to seem informed. And we'll pass all the news quizzes and we think we're informed, but we might not ever really read a 200, 300, 400 page book about the subject. So there's this stream of news, and we're poking our fingers into that stream, and it's bending our hand into strange, obscene things because we know this, or we're trying to know this, or we're trying to grasp it. And so I keep thinking about an ape who's putting his hands into a news stream, and even though he has these gorilla arms, it's bending his fingers backwards. He can't hold it all. And he tries to take up a handful and bite a piece, and there's never enough. The stream never ends. So how do we get distorted? How do we get bent out of shape by trying to grab all the news? All right, so we've just had war break out in Europe, and everybody's trying to have the answers. Everybody's trying to figure it out. And we don't figure it out. We can't figure it out. There's too much to know. There's too many gigabytes of information, and it's all unleashed. And so we lose ourselves, and people defriend each other on Facebook because they're not doing the talking points here. And everybody's getting canceled. I saw this coming because people are just too greedy for information. There's another story or another, study out of the University of Wisconsin that says red meat is good for you. And then, there's another story that a wine a day doesn't work for you. And then here's a human interest story about a woman from Uzbekistan who lived 109 and she drinks whiskey every day. And we don't know who to believe.
Right.
And there's no room for common sense. And so people distrust themselves. They distrust the government. They distrust the society, because everybody gets a chance to speak. And we're just sticking our hands into the news stream and all the water flowing through our fingers. We never get enough. And that is a distorted way to think about life, to think about, I need to know the right answer on the Ukraine situation. I need to know the right way towards peace in the Middle East. And people get all bent out of shape and hating each other over, which way do you draw the line in the West Bank and Gaza Strip? And I'm like, you got to be focused on yourself. You have to heal yourself. You have to cure yourself. And you're not going to be a right person if somebody can come up with an idea and then you're all focused on that. And so I think the news industry doesn't care about the holistic person. They only care about them, as an entity for money and votes. That's definitely what the parties want. The parties want money and votes. The religions want your soul. The banks want your money. Everybody wants a piece of you, and nobody wants you to be whole. And whatever the situation is, you can kind of tell who's going to say what ahead of time, because they're all bent out of shape about things that they can't control and that they can't understand. So when I was left and when I was right, I saw people defy their principles for expediency. And their principles were good principles, and they remain good principles, but they can't handle all the situations that life shows us. And so whatever it is, how to fix a banana souffle, there's a conservative way to fix a banana souffle, or there's a conservative, or there's a liberal way, or there's a progressive way. And then you have to, have this multicolored flag and declare your pronouns. And they want to control you as a person for the sake of an ideology. And the only way out of that, seems to me, is to put yourself in another historical context, one that nobody's talking about. So maybe you go play a video game and you get to be an Italian baron in the 1400s. And then nobody's politically talking about being an Italian baron in the 1400s, and you can enjoy fresh fruit. I played this game called Assassin's Creed, and it put me there. And I was like, I could do this. I could live in the 15th century, and I think I'd be quite happy. And so as soon as I recognized that I could be happy in the 15th century, eating fresh bananas and grapes, I was like, maybe I ought to look at what those people did to keep themselves happy. And that kind of thinking got me out of the contemporary thrash. And it saved my soul in a way. And I'm sympathetic, but also kind of feeling sorry for people who have to have the latest news. And what a disappointment. Conservatives don't know what to think about Russia right now. If you say Trump and Putin, and then it just rings alarm bells, and then people, they have the answers, right? But they don't have all the answers, and they can't tell the information from the disinformation. And it's a terrible place to be. I mean, you don't even know if you're an American anymore. And that's what I sense, that people are having a difficult time being a weird individual and making sense of life. And there's just some basic things you have to do that have to do with virtue and discipline, and you'll come out okay.
Well, I wasn't sure how we get from Regis's perfect feet to contemporary Stoicism, but you pulled it off, man. So my friend Ira, who I referred to before, he sent in a question. He said, I'd be curious to understand where Michael sits at the intersection of technology and Stoicism. Ira said, if I remember correctly, Stoics are mainly focused on getting joy from what you have and not worrying about what they don't have. But technology tends to be focused on finding ways to make our lives better and filling perceived gaps in happiness, fruitfulness. So how do you reconcile the two?
I think about the logos. And if you read the Bible, you would remember the beginning of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God,
with God, and the Word was God. And
the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and nothing that was not made was, something like that.
Yeah. Fast forward into verse 13 or 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Right. And so the idea of the logos is continuous throughout history. So even if you're back in 1400, you're not a different kind of Homo sapien than we are. Nobody evolves that quickly. Maybe the stomach bugs do, but we don't evolve that quickly. And what common sense has been and continues to be is the way we order logic and way we discipline ourselves to the logic. And so sticking close to that is rewarding in and of itself. And I happened to study the Tao when I was in my 20s. And that was very useful to help me just center myself, because Well, I'm not even fluent in what I learned, but it did put me at peace. But logic is at the center of this. There is a good way to live, and you'll be psychologically damaged if you go against it, because you won't be able to reconcile, what you can do. Technology works for me because of the expression of computer languages. That you can come to a point where you have something that makes sense. And even in video games, we can create universes of logic that you can walk through, and you learn the rules of your environment. And these can be fake environments, but it's something we all understand. It's the same thing that attracts us to the ideas presented in the Matrix. What is real? Are these rules good for me? And in areas of interest, in business intelligence, or in the intelligence business itself, a geopolitical intelligence, there are kind of rules that you can follow and things that you can codify and say, this is the way we can do X, Y, or Z. And it's an interesting way of learning. It is part and parcel of the philosophy of science. And we get away from that at our own peril. I think very much about, how to be free. You ask, what is an ooda Buddha? ooda was a concept, observe, orient, direct, and analyze. And it's a loop. And it was invented by a guy named John Boyd, who was basically the master of modern aircraft combat technologies.
And what are the four letters again? OODA.
OODA.
And it stands for?
I think it's observe, orient, react, analyze.
Okay.
And it's a loop. So what you want to do is loop faster, so you learn faster. And that translated for him to design airplanes that could turn faster, because then that changes the situation. And if you can react faster and move faster, then you learn more and you're ahead of the enemy or your opponent.
The other thing that occurs to me is, as something you were saying before, it sounds like you have some ambivalence about, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe you believe in the freedom of speech, but are ambivalent about the accessibility of microphones.
I think it's fair to say it's important that certain people be as correct as they possibly can be. So I don't want a tyranny of logic, and I don't want all of our expectations to be the same for everyone. I think there's room. Well, there's a necessity for leagues. There's a necessity for classes, and just because you love basketball doesn't mean you need to go one-on-one against Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Because if you went one-on-one against LeBron James, you'd hate basketball. You're like, there's no way I can win. I can't even get close to the basket. He steals the ball away from me every time. And you don't want to have a singing contest against Dua Lipa. And most people don't want to argue against their own minister. Most people can't out math their own high school math teachers. So we want leagues where there's people around our skill level and ability, and we can compete fairly with them. So I'm not suggesting that there's a tyranny, and that means Michael Jordan shouldn't be hanging around the playground saying, "Oh, you want to shoot for some money?" No, he should play in his league. So the philosophy of science helps us all to correct mistakes and then improve, but we have leagues. And so we don't break our necks feeling bad if somebody says 3.3 plus 2 is 7, if they're in the third grade. But if that's the chief NASA engineer and he's saying 3 plus 2 is 7, we're going to lose a probe, or the shuttle's going to blow up. Yeah. Because we thought the temperature in the O-ring was this temperature. So it's more costly for people in positions of power and authority to be wrong.
Yeah. So it's an interesting way to think about it, to create leagues. So the cynic in me is thinking about a lot of folks who are decrying, elitism, and, first learn what you're talking about in terms of the elites,
Right.
before you start complaining about it. To your point about the rocket scientist, we prefer that they knew their math before sending people out into space with,
Right. Right.
somebody who doesn't know how to their multiplication tables. So,
Yeah. And I've known people who used to work for Elon Musk and says, I just can't keep up that pace anymore. It's tough. It's tough working for that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, open up all the microphones, but don't judge everybody the same.
Yeah.
It's the stupidest thing of all to not let people, the ordinary person, let them have the comment section. Let them say what they're going to say.
Right.
They're really not going to change the direction of tanks in Ukraine.
Yeah.
No matter what they say. So don't hold everybody to this ridiculous standard and cancel people who again violate what you've hold your hands out in the news stream to say, oh, this is the new way things are supposed to be.
So in a sense, you do believe in a meritocracy. So so I'm thinking about this platform, and listen, we don't have the same level of listenership as somebody like Dan Bongino does now, or Sean Hannity's nightly viewership. but that's okay. That's okay.
Right.
I'm getting on other programs now that have, small listenerships.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't go on even the Dispatch at this point, or the Bulwark at this point, because I'm not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready for that level of conversation. I was in a conversation with a lady, wonderful woman who is a fellow at American Enterprise Institute. And not every conversation is within my expertise, let alone one that I am even conversant in. And her name's Danny Pletka. And I was able to ask intelligent questions until I got to a point where I thought I knew enough about it to assert somewhat of an opinion. It was about, Bahrain.
Okay.
And this, like, with somebody as intelligent and sharp as Danny Pletka, she pounced as the second that I showed my ignorance, and it was a lesson well learned. I wasn't ready. Like, I haven't earned the right to a certain opinion in a conversation with someone like that.
You do have that right because, and I was just really thinking about this just before I came on. At some point in your career in IT, you will master a language. And I thought about this in my 40s. I was like, all right, I have mastered this technology. I have done stuff with it that it wasn't supposed to do. That's how good I am with it. What do I do next? And I recognize these classes, what I call the classes of ambition. So you start off as a clueless newbie. All you want to do is ask questions. You want somebody to pay attention to you. So, hey, me, can I do this? And then after 2 years, you become a journeyman. I know what the tools are. I know where they go. I know how to make them work. And then you get to a point of mastery. Okay, I've mastered these tools. Not only do I make them work where they're not even supposed to work. So mastery goes two ways. You can be the go-to guy, or you can be the guru. And the guru looks at the philosophy of using these tools. And the go-to guy, he runs all the newbies and the journeymen. Says, okay, we're going to get this done. We're going to do it there. And then the other guy looks at the Tao of that. This is the beauty of execution when you do this philosophy. We have this mastery. Then you get to the rulers, and there's two kinds of rulers, and one ruler is called the Lord, and the other ruler is called the demiurge. These are the positions of power. All right. The Lord is his business to make your business his business. All right. He's the guy named Vinny, and he knows everything about you. He knew everything. He asked you who sent you to see me, but he already knows that.
Yeah.
Right. The Lord is the amusement park. He's the guy with the sign, you can't be this tall, and you can't get on the ride. Then there's the demiurge. The demiurge is just this master creator, just creates worlds. He designed the roller coaster that you really want to go on. All right. And then at the top of this is the servant. And the servant may or may not even exist, but he's the reason that you're in the amusement park in the first place. He's the reason, and the servant can serve from the bottom. He's like Stephen Biko in the crowd in South Africa. He's not at the podium. He's walking around in the crowd with a microphone, and everybody can hear his voice, but nobody knows where he's at physically. And we need to understand the brilliant value of service. And anyone who's a Christian understands this metaphor.
Yeah.
I came not to be a king, right? And then I'm liberating all these people with this new logos that I'm giving you. And so you always deserve to be able to ask a question to an expert, because the expert should be washing your feet. All right. The expert should be so glad that she's learned all of these books behind her. She's read them all, and you're actually interested in finding out. So she should never punish you for being curious.
I do have to clarify. Danny was so classy about it.
Oh, I understand. And that's, again, with leagues. There has to be a clear way for you get to that place.
Yeah.
So your leagues have to have fair competitions. So when you want to know Bahrain, then somebody will say, these are the 7 books you have to read to understand the history of Bahrain.
Right.
Instead of, you're looking at YouTube and RT and Al Jazeera and everybody and Facebook and Instagram, and you're never going to find out the truth there. So that's the role still for education and educators, and everybody who's an influencer now has some responsibility to help us along that path.
Yeah.
Because we're on the path of ambition. We want to know. We want to grasp the tools.
Right.
We want to climb that ladder and serve, ultimately, to serve mankind.
So we're 50 something minutes into this conversation, and I have not brought up free Black thought. So May 22nd, 2020, Nicole Hannah-Jones tweets, there is a difference between being politically Black and being racially Black. She subsequently removed that tweet. But did you at that moment get on the phone with Eric Smith and Jason Littlefield, Latoya Smith, and say, we got to do, like, how did this whole thing come about? Tell us about free Black thought.
Well, I was a big brother, and I grew up in a rough and tumble neighborhood. So I have a natural affinity for MMA, which means I watch Joe Rogan.
Okay.
And so I saw the first podcast with Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that. And I understood how political correctness has gotten worse and worse over the years. And I recognize, again, how they do damage to the philosophy of science, how they ignore the logos, how they call it discovery to discover the Blackness of the guy who went to the North Pole. And then you can celebrate, oh, this Black man went to the North Pole, but you learn absolutely nothing about the North Pole. All you care about is the color of the person who went there. And so you're not teaching geography, you're teaching hagiography. So as the racial thing has gotten wrong, it has gone in a completely wrong direction, which is, if you think you have a different message to a person about race, depending on what race they are and depending on what race you are, then you can't be telling the truth. You're making up a story that you think they want to hear, or you think it's good for them. And that's just wrong. And so many people are color struck and wrong-headed on this. It does damage to truth. It does damage for the ability to find out the truth. It does damage to the very notion of saying your mind is capable of learning anything. All right. There are people are shocked that, a person of color, quote unquote, likes to eat raw fish. Yeah, but I grew up in a neighborhood where, at the bowling alley, there was a sushi bar. in 1975 because this was a Nisei second generation Japanese neighborhood where I grew up in Crenshaw, Holiday Bowl, and I love sukimono because that was their little salad. But to come up with these new racial rules is a bad idea. But Jones had something, a kernel of truth there, which is saying, Chuck D said it another way, every brother ain't a brother. And so ultimately, you kind of have to understand that every African American is not going to think the same way. They're not going to grow up in the same neighborhood, even though it's the same 3 or 4 directors that get to write the Boys in the Hood movies, and they portray all these stereotypical characters in the stereotypical way. And that pained me coming from South LA, which suddenly became South Central, and all the things, associated with that. Thanks for nothing, Mike Davis, writer of City of Quartz. You damn socialist. And the truth about your own neighborhood, you can't represent that as well as, the famous people who get major media coverage. And so what has to be acknowledged is diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and you have to do honor to the process of correcting errors, which means everybody gets to raise their hand and says, I'm not sure of what you're saying there is true. Let me tell you something, another logical way to look at this. And unless you're having that open debate with respect, then you're shunning people, and you're making it a self-fulfilling idiocy, because no Black person ever does that, all right? Or all Black people should do this. And I learned the hard way, you shouldn't second guess Black folks. You shouldn't second guess anyone. And manners are the way to get in. And we don't care about manners anymore. We're just crazy AF. And we think we can do that all the time. And it's not wrecking society, because there are people who still have respect, and still people who can debate, and still people who can correct errors and are gracious about it. But we can get isolated. Those of us who value truth, who value debate, who value discovery, who value reason and humor. And when that gets to the university, when the university is challenged in its ability to provide an environment for discovery and humor and reason and thoughtfulness, then society's in trouble.
Yeah.
And so we're in a bad point. We're still not as bad as the 70s, but we're in a bad point, and we need to fix things.
Yeah. So just so folks know a little bit more about Free Black Thought, what platforms are you engaged in, or how would you engage so that different points of view can be heard and be part of a larger conversation? So
freeblackthought.com, spelled the ordinary way. And then down below in the description, there's a Twitter account. Right now, we're over 30,000 followers from scratch. We're barely a year old, but we're making an impact, and people are coming to us saying, "Thank you for existing." So we're kind of alt Black, and we put together this compendium, because we have academics who've read a lot of this stuff, and who are thoughtful people who care about the quality of discussion and debate, and the search for truth, and the realization that we don't all find the truth.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be a more painful process than it needs to be wrong.
Right.
So let people be wrong, and let people be judged fairly.
So before I ask my last question, I want to give you a fair shot if you have any, and ask if you have any questions for me.
Well, how do you see this, the new media? What can we do to preserve an open society when we know that Whoopi Goldberg or Joy Behar or whoever is the spokesman in the White House press room can say something that people will believe, whether or not it's true? How do we percolate through society when we don't have royalty?
So I think you're already doing it. I'm trying to do it in my own way. I mentioned a couple of independent media platforms earlier: Bulwark, Dispatch, Politicology, Stand Up with Pete Dominic, Matt Lewis in the News. There's all these. So some of my favorite, some of the folks that I follow most closely, whether I agree with them all the time or not, are folks who had great success and were prominent voices within a certain movement, and then risked and ultimately lost a great deal because they took a stand on principle. Those are the folks that are the most interesting to me. So all of what you're writing on Substack, that's a good way to start. That's part of it. That's part of the answer to exactly what you're asking. Now, the democratization of media, the ability for independent voices like yours and like mine to speak up, the tools that we use in order to do it, the accessibility of it isn't good or bad. Thus, sometimes bad voices and bad ideas and bad mores are going to enter into some thinking that's like a wave that all of a sudden are we all supposed to assume this? And it's the very questions that you're asking, or some of the ideas that you're overtly pushing back on. So I think that this is a good start. I think that it's not just 3 networks and PBS anymore. It's not just, the AM and the FM dial. It's not just, it goes so far beyond that. And I think even though, I was sort of alluding to it before, even though I don't have 11 million like Joe Rogan, I don't have 2.3 like Tucker on a nightly basis, but I got a few hundred, a few dozen, a few thousand, and growing. And that's kind of cool that we can have conversations with individuals like yourself, with individuals like Danny Pletka, with individuals like Dr. Russell Moore. I mean, talk about a guy who is prominent in the evangelical movement in the Southern Baptist Convention. And he said, no, something, when children are being abused, we have to investigate that. We have to stop it. We have to care for our victims. And if we as an organization disagree with that notion, I cannot be part of this organization. So now Dr. Moore has his own newsletter, has his own voice, places where someone like that, those are principles I can align with, even if I don't necessarily align with all of his political and theological positions. But there are some things where we can agree. So I don't know if that necessarily fully answers your question, but I'm encouraged by folks who are willing to risk something, risk even just their popularity, let alone their income. We had former Congressman Joe Walsh, who, he was in Congress and they had this national radio platform. And he said, and he voted for Trump the first time around, but he said at a certain point, I forget if it was Charlottesville or Helsinki, he said at a certain point, he just couldn't do it anymore. Right. But it cost him something because he's a rich man. He was a rich man because he had millions and millions of listeners, but he just couldn't. If the listeners were listening to him to try to pretend that he believed in what Trump was saying in Helsinki, that Putin's better than my own intelligence community, that I'm favoring or any one of those mental and moral acrobatics that you got to do in order to continue in that. But he said, it's okay. I don't need that income because that's dirty income. Right. That's, folks who still want to engage with me. And if I can figure out a way to pay my rent, some other way, maybe I'll drive, a $15,000 car instead of a $100,000 car. And it's all good, so those are the voices that I'm as a consumer drawn to, and a thinker, somebody who wants to process all these things philosophically, theologically, socially, but also as someone who wants to participate in it in some small way. So these are the things that are rattling around in my noggin.
Cool. Yeah, I understand that. It's for me, that'll probably be the next thing I'm going to write about. It's unfinished. It's how well do your morals scale, and our thinking and our memory. It doesn't always scale, and sometimes we get more audience than we deserve, and we can't handle that. And I think if you look at the lives of celebrities, that's half of their life, is figuring out how do I survive all the scrutiny? How do I survive having 50 million fans? It's a scary thing, and none of us are good at it, and none of us evolved to be good at it. So I was talking about slavery this past couple of weeks or so, and the notion of one of the excuses for slavery is, well, you need handlers, these people to handle these other things. I can't be cooking my own breakfast. I can't be making my own coffee. I'm the genius here. So I need this help. And then I immediately thought about, famous comedians or stars in their entourage and their personal shoppers. And they're minions. And those are the minions that are necessary so that you can reach the millions. It doesn't scale. That's not real leadership. And you have to order people around in order to keep that quote unquote leadership. And that's what dictators do, because I'm the guy. Don't you know who I am? And so, maybe we need to scale back. Maybe we need, I don't know. I think distributing power helps, and getting people away from these national hot button issues help, because we'll sacrifice local control if we keep ceding to these celebrity politicians and their narrow focuses.
Yeah.
And their cults of personality. It's a dangerous thing. And it's the opposite of democracy. It's the opposite of self-determination.
Right.
So people should take care of themselves, their neighbors, their family, scale it down and live a high quality life without worrying so much about, do I have 1 million followers?
Right. Yeah, I had a conversation kind of along those same lines about, I finally got on TikTok. So the conversation was about building up the followers and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I realized, okay, it's really easy to get caught up in that sort of hamster wheel of got to get more followers. But the thing is, the presence on TikTok isn't necessarily to promote the podcast. It's just another place where we can engage in a different kind of a way.
Yeah.
I'm not passionate necessarily about growing the followers. I'm passionate about engaging with people of goodwill in good faith on important matters, and whether that's through a podcast or on TikTok, or doing the cha-cha or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
Anyway, this is absolute blast. I'm so glad I had the chance to talk to you. We're in each other's neck of the woods, so maybe we should get some sushi or something like that. Absolutely, man. That'd be fun. I know
some great places. Sushi, ramen.
Okay, all right. I might have to defer. I am a sushi snob, though. I will tell you in advance. Like if we're doing New York theater, I'm going to pick the theater. I'm going to pick the play, but I'm still open. I'm still. Right. We're actually going to Katsuya tonight, the original.
All right.
Yeah. But that's all right. I'm always open. If somebody knows sushi, I'm always open to a new idea.
Excellent.
All right. So before we go, how can we find more info about you, Free Black Thought, the essays that you're sharing? How can we find you online?
Sure. I'm at Stoic Observations. So it's mdcbowen.substack.com. And you can also go to mdcbowen.info and about.me/mdcbowen. Yeah. So there's only one MDC Bowen out there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So it's mdcbowen.com and mdcbowen.info.
.info gets you everywhere. And .org gets you to some of my old stuff.
Okay. All right. And then Free Black Thought, again, is freeblackthought.com. A lot of good stuff there. So, Mike, I really appreciate getting to know you better. I do hope it's not the last time we hang out. And thanks for doing this.
Okay.
And as always, if you dig what we're doing here, please hit that subscribe button, leave a review and comments wherever you get your podcasts. Tell a friend about TP&R. We're easier to recommend than ever. It's politicsandreligion.us. It's politicsandreligion.us. You can even support our program through the Patron app on our site. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week. Thank you for joining us today. If you dig what we're doing here, it is super easy to follow us. You can go to our site, politicsandreligion.us. That's with the and spelled out, A-N-D. Politicsandreligion.us. And we're on all the socials, at TP and R Pod. You know, TP and R Pod for Talking Politics and Religion Pod. And here's a big way you can support us, by becoming one of our patrons. You can even become a producer or executive producer of our program and have a lot more say in who we bring on, the kinds of questions we explore, or just help us keep the lights on. But mostly, we really appreciate you giving us a listen. So for the whole team here at Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back in a few days to do our little part in Tikkun Olam.